Looking at stuff today that I wanted to talk about for Monday's show, it kind of hit me. What an incredible season this has been from a storyline standpoint, right? And I'll get to my favorite storyline. I just can't get enough of it. But from the Packers implosion to now Aaron Rodgers is injured, to Tom Brady retiring, unretiring, going to Fox after the season, but still some people believe he's not going to retire, and his team stinks. He also got his coach fired. To then situations like Lamar Jackson, who I'm sure you saw the thing on Twitter, like their season, I thought they were going to be a dominant team. And clearly it has been somewhat of a roller coaster. Now, to me, it's not all on Lamar, right? Defensively, they've been pretty hit or miss. I would say he definitely hasn't been as good as his dominant years, but he has not been the issue. But they have kind of been, for a quote-unquote powerhouse, struggled a little bit. I mean, they just have. And just all the drama around the league, all these teams, the implosions by the Rams. I mean, the Rams do not have a first-round pick. And as of today, who knows if we're ever going to see Matt Stafford again this season and beyond. Cooper Kupp is injured. Now Aaron Donald is injured? That'd be like, the Warriors, Steph, Clay, Draymond injured. It's like, you're screwed. Godspeed, because it's over. And the drama of football, like the off-the-field stuff, always coincides with the on-the-field stuff. It's why it's king. It's why when you see these ratings, it's like, yeah, because it's not just fake social media drama. That happens a lot in the NBA. It's like, that's exhausting. What's going on the field? Well, it carries over to the field, right? Rodgers injured, Rodgers drama, ayahuasca, retirement, and then boom. He's either awesome or this year he's kind of sucked. But it's kind of justified because the thumb is injured. But my favorite story, and I cannot get enough of it, is Russell Wilson. I mean, he's easily one of the more famous players in the NFL. I would say on the fame level, I mean, Tom's number one, Rodgers probably number two. When you factor in who he's married to, and when I say fame, it's like, does your girlfriend, does your wife, does your mom know who he is? Like a lot of football fans are going to know. They're going to know Derek Carr is. They're going to know Daniel Jones is. Can I ask my girlfriend or your mom who Russell Wilson is? And you can, and they'll say yes. They gave him this contract that hasn't even started yet. Think about that. His contract has not started yet. It's a contract extension. He still had years to go. It's why it's kind of gone viral this year of the dead cap money that is associated with this deal moving forward. I mean, it is an all-time disastrous move. When I was a kid in the 90s, so many contracts in basketball, football, and definitely baseball were given out that were just awful. They would give the guy a lot of money relative to the time, and then that player would suck, and it would just be a disastrous contract. And for the most part in the NFL, obviously Dan Snyder in the 2000s were giving out a lot of contracts. When I was with the Eagles, we signed Nnamdi Asomugha. He lasted like 2 seasons there. Most position players, even if you completely whiff, you got them for 3 years max. When you sign these quarterbacks to 150, 180 guaranteed money, like you're in the boat with them for a long, long time. They're not going anywhere. And now Russell Wilson, who his game was predicated on movement, on kind of pizzazz, on being special, right? Like certain quarterbacks are just, Dan Marino had just an elite arm, right? He could just make elite throws in his prime that no one else could make. I'm trying to think of other guys like, Eli Manning. When Eli Manning got hot in those Super Bowls, he was in the pocket just throwing fucking seeds. Russell Wilson was a lot based on like 360s in the pocket, running around. That's all gone. And then on top of that, the basic stuff is awful. Like he's got nothing. It's like a pitcher that's throwing 97 miles an hour, comes back the next year, he's throwing 86. You're like, well, does he have any other pitches? They're like, no. He's just got an 86-mile-an-hour pitch that if it's in the zone, it's getting hit a long way the other way. And the Denver Broncos are completely tied with this guy for several years moving forward. Like, it's just an all-time albatross move. And think of the ramifications, like the LA Rams and the Denver Broncos do not have their first-round pick. Both teams are headed for potentially drafting in the top 5. Like the Lions in Seattle have top 5 picks. Hell, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the best record in the league, who are probably cruising, I would never say cruise because it's the NFL, but are definitely headed to the number 1 seed in the NFC, have a top 7 pick right now in the draft. So to me this year, the storylines, because the football has been a little hit or miss. I would say the football hasn't been as good. You know my theory on that. A lot of that is the CBA. A lot of that is protecting, everything that happened with concussions earlier in the decade or last decade, and they shifted the rules. I don't love them, but I do understand protecting the quarterbacks. I hate the word defenseless player. This is football. No one is defenseless going over the middle of the field. But I do understand for the health of the business and the health of the sport and the trickle-down effect to youth sports, why you had to, placate's the wrong way to put it, but, transition your sport into a safer environment when it comes to hitting. And definitely the practices, the double days, the product is not the same, but the storylines are pretty damn good. They really are. And we're kind of having the end of an era of Brady, of Rodgers, headed toward a new era of all these young guys. And I was thinking about it today, like the Zach Wilson story, which I hit on Sunday night, is just an all-timer, right? They draft the guy number 2 overall. By the middle of the second year, a franchise that, for the most part, is usually pretty crappy, is really good. I mean, you watch the Jets, and they had to bench him. They did not have a choice. I think I saw on the internet today, Saleh said, and of course he did, yeah, Mike White's still going to be our starter. And I love how he prefaced it it's a week-to-week thing. No, it's not a week-to-week thing. It's over. Zach Wilson, you're not even the backup. You're the third stringer. But that quarterback class in 2021 was thought of so highly. And I was living in the Bay Area at the time. It was Trey Lance or Justin Fields or Mac Jones. Quarterback talk was nonstop because all these quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence would have been the number 1 pick in the majority of drafts in the history of the league, right? Maybe Peyton Manning's draft, maybe Andrew Luck's draft, maybe Michael Vick's draft. There's a small percentage of drafts where Trevor Lawrence would have been 100% the pick. So that, to me, whether he turns out to be a stud, and he showed signs of life yesterday against the Ravens, made a couple great passes, and obviously Doug Peterson being a former quarterback, he's going to give him a chance over time to maximize his potential, right? And I would still bet on Trevor Lawrence. Now, bet on him to be some all-timer. Probably wouldn't put my money there, but I will bet on him to be a really, really good player. The other guys, who the hell knows? I mean, Zach Wilson is benched. Trey Lance had a broken ankle. Justin Fields, who's, to me, of the 4 guys, the most interesting, but the way he plays, he's getting the shit knocked out of him. His team has no offensive lineman. They had to turn him into a running back just to operate on offense because their receivers were so bad. So he started running, he started killing, he started taking these hellacious shots. He leads the league in sacks. He's already injured, so I just hope the guy can live, but I'm a fan. And Mac Jones is pretty average. And I know everyone's like, well, he had a good Thanksgiving night game. Okay. It's I would not want Mac Jones to be my quarterback if I had any options. But the previous year's draft, how about that thing? Because all you want when you draft a guy really high is, of course, you'd want the guy to become Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers. But most of the time, that's not going to happen. Can the guy just become your starting quarterback for a decade and then put it on your GM and your coach to build up the team and be in a position to just make the playoffs and win playoff games? Most teams, when they draft a guy high, would be I'd be good with Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers. And you go, God, I'd like better. Well, of course you would. But if I told you the day you drafted a quarterback in the top 10 picks, this guy is going to have Phillip Rivers' career as a player, as a GM, you would sign up for that. Then it's on you to do a better job. Ultimately, the Chargers did. They actually drafted well. Their just coaches always suck. But you know what I mean. But it looks like the quarterback draft of 2020, Joe Burrow, he's kind of got his swag back. I mean, have you noticed? The Bengals started 0-2. They've won 7 of their last 9 games. They're coming. They look fantastic. They just got a fantastic win against the Titans. Anytime you beat the Titans, even though the Titans shouldn't be good, they always are, 7-3 coming into that game, that was a playoff level game. Now, in theory, the Bengals should always win. They have Joe freaking Burrow, and that team has Ryan Tannehill. But I think most of us agree the coach for the Bengals, who I always forget his name, Zach Taylor, we're all taking Mike Vrabel over Zach Taylor. But when you have Joe Burrow, and he's that good, he elevates your franchise like Giannis or Steph Curry does. He changes the outlook of the team. He's just got it all. And one of my favorite parts about sports is when you have a player who you just go, yeah, we're just going to fucking hop on his back for a decade and he's going to carry us to the promised land. And when I say the promised land, you might never win a championship. I mean, I grew up a Barry Bonds fan. You can say what you want all the time about all you want about steroids. He was winning MVPs before he ever took, the cream, the clear, and all the juice in his butt. But the reality is, when you had him on your team, you had a chance to make the playoffs every year. Just like watch the Warriors now for a decade. Like, ultimately, they've had a lot of great players, and Kevin Durant joined up. Steph Curry is the leading heartbeat of the franchise and the reason they turned into a power. And you watch the Bengals, who have had actually a better couple decades than I think they get credit for. They were pretty consistently good under Marvin Lewis. Now, they weren't winning playoff games, but they were very, very competitive and very well built. I saw them live multiple times. Actually, saw them live one time with the Eagles and saw them live one time with the Raiders. They beat the crap out of when I was with the Eagles, and they destroyed the Raiders in 2015. That team was really good. Whitworth and Pac-Mans and A.J. Greens and Eiferts. Like that team, Giovanni Bernard, they were stacked. But they had fallen on hard times. And they drafted this kid who was, let's call it what it is. He was the starting quarterback for one of the greatest teams ever, but he was a one-year wonder in college, and he's beyond lived up to the hype. And I love watching the guy. And I know a lot of people get mad at me, and I don't mean to do this, but sometimes I forget about talking about him when I discuss, obviously, Herbert, Josh Allen. I throw Mahomes as the leader in the clubhouse, Lamar. He deserves to get talked, and I need to do a better job of using him in that group because he's 100% part of it, and he's 100% part of the crew who's going to lead the league as Brady retires, as Rodgers goes on to do ayahuasca, as Russell Wilson now stinks. They're just, that quarterback class is kind of over, and this new crew of guys, Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow, is a huge part of that. And before I get to Herbert, Tua was the 5th pick. And listen, I would still take Herbert over Tua. So would the Dolphins. I got news for you, Dolphins fans. If your general manager and your head coach had to choose today, would they do a straight-up trade today for Justin Herbert over Tua? They would. Now, I'm not trying to diminish what Tua has done, though I am still skeptical would be strong. He's clearly a solid player, and I respect guys that their teammates respect and like. We've just seen it go the other way with countless players. Clearly, the Miami Dolphins like the guy as a human, and that goes a long way when you're the quarterback. So he is a likable individual, high-character guy, good guy. I see all these clips, he makes me laugh. I'm a pro Tua the human. The player, I like my quarterback to have a little bit of a stronger arm and to be a better athlete. But maybe they've done such a good job of building it up around him that he's thriving. I mean, he's 70%, 19-3. You cannot dispute the numbers. Even the biggest haters, and I'm not the biggest hater, but I'm somewhat of a hater, can't dispute the numbers. It's going to get a little tougher. Playing the top defense this week on the road to the 49ers. Still has to go to New England, who's really good on defense, and still has to go to the Bills. I know they beat them last time, but let's face it, check the stats. It was kind of a crazy win. But he's having a fantastic season. So if you can get a quarterback who can be your starter, be 8-3, 19-3, every team in the league would take that. Now, is it sustainable? He got crushed again in the game against the Texans. He's obviously had multiple concussions this year. I know they're like a neck injury. No, it's multiple concussions. And you know me, I'm not one to say he should never play again. If he wants to play, this ain't my life. But he is one injury away. So he, to me, of the three guys, is clearly the one I have the biggest skepticism on. But so far, he shut a lot of people up, including myself. And last but not least, the game against two coaches that no human alive would want coaching their team beside, the Arizona Cardinals and the LA Chargers ownership, Kingsbury and Staley, neither deserved to win that game. And the difference ultimately was Herbert driving him down when he had to have it, throwing a game-winning touchdown, throwing the game-winning two-point conversion, who I will give the Charger coaching staff credit, even though Brandon Staley has nothing to do with the offense. Fantastic call by Joe Lombardi. Run a little, a little Texas route, just kind of they bunched up the receivers and the tight end, and it was just, the Cardinals had no fucking clue what was going on. Gerald Everett walked into the end zone. It was stealing. It was stealing candy from a baby. It was an easy play Herbert made with his eyes closed. Win the game. It's cool. He was fantastic in the game. He really was. And if I know sometimes on the internet you have to argue and try to justify, he doesn't win any games. Well, yeah, he's playing for Brandon Staley in a defense that's awful. He's also playing with wide receivers because Mike Williams' ankle always gets hurt now. And Keenan Allen's had an up-and-down season because of a hamstring injury. When I say up and down, he's been missing games. He's back now. When he's just played, he's dealing with Keenan Allen, who I respect. Keenan Allen's a fantastic player. He is so skilled because he can't run. but he can get open with ease. He's a really good player. And Austin Eckler, who's a tiny little scat back, who's also a good player, but that's who Herbert's dealing with. Like, give Herbert Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Juju Smith and Andy Reid, he would be awesome. Give him Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis and some of the guys they had in Buffalo. Give him the 49ers roster, he would crush it. Hell, he's statistically crushing it now. And I'm just glad to see him win because it's not his fault that Brandon Staley's his head coach and tries to lose him games on a weekly basis. But those three quarterbacks are, especially to me, Burrow and Herbert. And if Tua can just stay healthy, which is a big if, because he can't really avoid hits because he's not a very quick twitch athlete. Like, that's the one thing with Herbert. Herbert is a big-time athlete. And Burrow is not the level of athlete like Herbert and definitely like Josh Allen, but he has like an instinctive quality to him. It's why his comp, he's clearly a better version of this, but Tony Romo had this, and Tony Romo's actually a really good athlete, ability to kind of avoid hits and just scramble around and make plays with his legs. When I say make plays with his legs, like legs behind the line of scrimmage to then throw the ball. But that quarterback class, man, you can't really ask for much more than they're doing right now. I wanted to do a little hot seat update because, listen, you see in college, coaches get blown out. Obviously in the NFL, I think on average, it's 5 to 6 coaches every year. Some years it's like 8, and some years it's like 4. Hard to tell this year. I guess we've already had one. The Panthers relieved of their duties, and we'll get into, it looks like pretty clearly, a couple more. But I wanted to start with one that, coming into the season, it looked like he was destined to get fired. One, because the team just kind of consistently loses. And two, he made a pretty desperate move to acquire Carson Wentz, which, in my opinion, was kind of nuts. Like, you're going to trade 2 third-round picks for this guy? And I, over the years, have been a Carson Wentz defender, but I was like, Ron, this is, I don't know what you're doing here. And they got, in a weird way, a little lucky that Wentz got injured. Because then they go to the savior, Taylor Heineke, and all they've done since is win. Now you look up and the Commanders are unveiling this statue that everyone's just crushing them for, but they're also winning games. Because the one thing that Dan Snyder truly has nothing to do with is the game plan and how the players are going to operate. And Taylor Heineke and just this team. And Ron Rivera went from, this guy's going to be done at the end of the season, to, is he going to get an extension? Because they're not just 7-5. Their next 2 games are the Giants and the Giants. And like I said, Brian Daboll, he's already accomplished so much this season. If he doesn't win another game, hat tip to him, the Giants fans should be excited. But they're not very good. And now the football team, Commanders, goes Giants by Giants. I mean, there is a decent chance going into the 49er game on Christmas Eve, the Washington Commanders are 9-5. I would say worst case scenario, they're 8-6. I mean, that's a pretty incredible accomplishment. So I would say hot seat. This guy's seat is not hot at all. It's cold. Ron Rivera and Scott Turner, North Turner's son, have really done. Jack Del Rio, fuck, their defense is flying around, hitting people. They got Chase Young eventually coming back. Defense is good. Commanders are rolling. Kingsbury. I know he got an extension, but unlike players, right, the extension is, there is no salary cap. This is a disaster. And twofold on this. One, he was the guy pounding the table for Kyler Murray. Now, it's weird. They both share the same agent. Obviously, a huge part of his offense, at least in his mind, was predicated and tied to this quarterback. But it feels like Kyler Murray does not like Cliff Kingsbury. Now, maybe it's just in his nature to not even realize when he's throwing people under the bus, but that's what he did. He threw Cliff Kingsbury under the bus yesterday when they talked about an interception on a 4th down. He basically said we were F schematically, which is a direct reflection of, I don't know, the head coach who's also the offensive coordinator and the schemer. So that situation, like the relationship between coach and quarterback, is not good. The other thing is, if you siphon out last year, which did not end well, right? They limped to the finish. They lost a devastating Week 18 game that would have won them division, and then they got throttled in the first round of the playoffs. And then this year's been an utter disaster. They're 4-8, feels like they're headed towards 6-11. So basically, a losing season in 2 of his 4 seasons. The other year, he went 8-8, but again, like last year, limped to the season and missed the playoffs. And this year, it feels like they're trending backwards. I would say him and Steve Keim, because I think if Kingsbury goes, Keim probably goes this time too, even though their roster actually has some talent. But I do think Michael Bidwell's going to go, well, the Rams are in shambles. Seattle feels like they have momentum now. Pete's not going anywhere. They're going to have a top pick because of Denver. And the 49ers are just pretty well built, and they're definitely not going around. We do have a lot of talent on this team. Why don't we make a change? Now, he, historically, at least his family, I don't know him specifically, though. I think when you talk to people that in the agent community that say they can be a little cheap, that's fair. Is he willing to eat a lot of money to pay these guys off where he just extended? If they don't win another game, which I would say is always on the table, and Cliff Kingsbury's your head coach, you would have to say it's on the table. So I would say Cliff Kingsbury's seat is definitely hot, and it's got a chance to really heat up. This seat isn't hot. It's burned to the ground. Like, it's over. Nathaniel Hackett is done. Like, he's a one-and-done coach. Like, that was he got one season. He's like Freddie Kitchens, Jim Tom Sula. He will never be a head coach again. Because I think it's very, very difficult to be a one-and-done coach and ever be taken seriously again. Like, you can be 2 or 3 years and get another chance, right? If you become an offensive coordinator, you get to kind of rehab your name. I don't think you can be a one-and-done at the level in which Nate Hackett did. The offense is one of the worst we've ever seen. The game management was horrendous. It has just felt like the only reason the guy's in that position is because Aaron Rodgers wanted him there. And then, obviously, Aaron Rodgers basically declined the trade offer, went back to Green Bay, and now Nate Hackett was forced to coach Russell Wilson, and it's ended his season. That's a problem. The other guy that I don't know if you're going to have back-to-back one-and-done coaches, but the Lovie Smith experiment is not going well. Now, they're not exactly some team loaded with talent. They got a long way to go, and they look like a lock destined for the number 1 overall pick, which I think when the dust settles will be Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. But I would say that when you factor in this is a team that's going to have a lot more reinforcements coming, they have Cleveland Browns picks for years to come, you would have to say that it is on the table. That you would think that if Lovie Smith goes one and done, it's at least foreseeable. Now, maybe they go 2 years with Lovie. They just suck this year. They let him coach the team again next year, suck again, and then figure it out from there. But this has been pretty ugly with the Houston Texans. Like, they're getting dramatically worse. I thought for a second on Sunday when Stefanski scored late in the game and decided to not go for 2. It's like, bro, you are 3-7. You're playing Tom Brady. You got him on the ropes. Go for 2. Now, they ended up winning in overtime because somehow Tampa punted twice. Who punts twice in a 10-minute overtime? Tampa did. And he won the game. But I do wonder, like, I'm not as big of a Stefanski hater as some, but the Haslams are nuts. I mean, they are crazy. So to think that Stefanski, like, they might just say, well, we could have been way better if we had a better coach, and then we would have been in position when Deshaun got back to make a playoff run. Instead, he shows up, we're 4-7, and our season's basically already over. So I would say his seat isn't too hot, but they've had discussions. And then last but not least, this guy would never get fired, but we always got to be on Amazon Prime watch, and that's Sean McVay. Their team is now 3-8. Matt Stafford is on the shelf. Cooper Kupp is on the shelf. And now Aaron Donald is on the shelf. So you have to ask yourself, you go, they don't have a pick next year. They don't have a very good offensive line. They have no running backs. Their best players now are aging and injured. Is this guy going to keep coaching? Now, you know where I stand on this. I think it's a pretty exhausting topic, but the fact is it's a topic because they're going to suck. Like, they're in the all screwed category. Like, ultimately, Denver has an unreal defense and has young players on offense. Maybe if they get a new coach and Russell just gets a little bit better, has some offseason motivation, they run the ball, they could be much more competitive next year. Maybe Arizona somehow convinced Sean Payton to take the job and he's able to get the most out of Kyler Murray. I don't know. I don't see how the Rams are any good next year because their margin for error naturally is so small because they're so top-heavy with 2 or 3 players. The moment one of them gets hurt, they're screwed. They're not going to have cap space to sign guys. And let's face it, most guys on the open market aren't that good anyway. I mean, their one big offseason signing was Allen Robinson, and he was average at best for them. Honestly, he was below. So I think the Rams, if you're Sean McVay, You go, God damn, how are we going to improve? And the answer is you're not. So he's not a hot seat guy. He's just a I'm out guy.